So this is on the Green New Deal, and it's in particular how the Green New Deal has changed the debate over policy. And so, like a standard negotiation tactic is that you start with demands that are unrealistic, but that sets the terms for the negotiation so that your hope is that you're going to end up far ahead of where you would have been had you started with a more realistic starting point. And so, one way to think about the consequences of the Green New Deal is that it has already moved the terms of the debate. That instead of the Greens, proposing the most politically viable form of restricting fossil fuels or promoting wind and solar, they've proposed the most radical. And now, as a result, previously radical seeming policies are starting to be seen as moderate. So, for example, Dianne Feinstein was just had a resolution calling for net zero U.S. emissions by 2050, which a year ago would have been like, this is unrealistic. This is a big deal, and everybody needs to fight it. And now it's like, oh, 2050, that's pretty good. And Tom Pyle, who's president of the conservative group American Energy Alliance, he actually made a
I
perceptive.
wouldn't call them conservative.
Okay,
I would call them free market, but
okay, fair. Um, he made a pretty perceptive comment about this, which he said that a danger of the Green New Deal is that it's giving other Republicans and other groups some wiggle room to push forth less extreme options such as cap and trade and carbon taxes. So it's this idea of like, we've seen this Green New Deal, it's very scary, it's very radical, and now these Republicans who have been trying to, do something that appears green and allows them to position themselves as genuinely concerned about climate are now endorsing things that would have been political poison, that were political poison even for Democrats a decade ago. And but he also went on to say this, which I thought was interesting. He said, quote, "I appreciate the leadership of the Western Caucus," which was the event he was at, "recognizing fighting this proposal, not coming up with an alternative." And what I take that to mean is that they're opposing the Green New Deal by saying no to it rather than saying, not the Green New Deal, let's do cap and trade or carbon taxes. And I think that's a real mistake. Like, the choice is not oppose the Green New Deal or compromise in its direction. It should be reframing the debate so that you have your own positive, what we would call your policy 100, your ideal policy. Because if you have your own policy, then people are no longer judging the everything by the opponent's policy. It's not, is this, less aggressive or less radical than the Green New Deal? It's, all right, here's something that we think is good, and the Green New Deal would be the complete opposite of this.
I agree with your analysis totally, and it's scary. I'm thinking a lot about how to counter this. One thing is that if any of our listeners are really involved, if you're really connected on the policy end, or if you just have a lot of resources where you're dealing with this stuff, definitely reach out to us, because it's the kind of thing where our team is particularly good with helping with message creation on this kind of thing. Because there is really a positive narrative that's necessary. It's just a question of how does one go about not just crafting that, but disseminating it. But I totally agree with your analysis of what's going wrong, and all the specific examples of how it's shifting. And so we could think about what are other what are other ways to think of it. But you were just, when you mentioned Feinstein's thing, I thought, well, why doesn't have somebody have a goal that 2 billion more people have energy by the year 2050? Like, that sounds like a goal. Or what about, the eradication of poverty by 20? That would be a good goal. And then that would, like, universal human prosperity by 2050. And then you could point out, well, if we have universal human prosperity, then pretty much no matter what happens with climate, people will be okay. And so that might be the way to go, is because one thing, this is an undeveloped idea of mine, but when it comes to framing things in energy, you can sometimes talk about, okay, well, what's the best form of energy? But ultimately, energy is a means to an end. So, like, often it's best to focus on in an even higher level goal, like something like universal prosperity by 2050, and then talk about how to get there and that part of it is global energy abundance, but global energy abundance as a means to that end. So maybe we just came up with it here. So I'm happy with that as a start.